I can tell you what's on my mind. Aggie football, Astros baseball. Yesterday, the Astros did make a move before the trade deadline. I'm not sure how this move came together. They stole from their left hand to give to their right hand. They've needed an outfielder desperately. They have the worst outfield probably in baseball. When your outfield bats 7, 8, 9, your outfield stinks. But they traded away one of their 3 best starting pitchers, someone who was the pitcher of the month in May. I saw him described as an enigma, and I think that word's pretty accurate. He was the pitcher of the month in May, and he pitched like a minor leaguer for most of June and half in July. He has spent way too much time on the IL. Enigma. He has an insane strikeout rate who has control issues. Talking about Spencer Arrighetti, who, if you hang out here on the Louie Bellina Show, you know I love Spencer Arrighetti. So the Astros needed to add starting pitching and identified a starting outfielder who can bat in the top half of the order as their primary need. They had more than one need. So they traded one of their top 3 starting pitchers, and starting pitching was a position of need, to address another hole. Like, what was the net gain? They acquired outfielder Dalton Varsho from the Blue Jays for Spencer Arrighetti. So they addressed the need by trading from a position of need, and in the end, is the net gain anything? Because like last night, Varsho, the Blue Jays are at Dyken Park. Last night was game 1. There are photos that when the deal went down, you had Espada, the Astros manager. He walked into the bullpen where Arrighetti was getting his work in and notified him of the trade as they're walking across the outfield. And he's walking Arrighetti just across Dyken Park from the Astros bullpen over to the Blue Jays side because they were in town, because it was the Astros Blue Jays trade. It's unreal. It's like surreal. That's professional sports. That's how baseball go. And then after the trade, there's Varsho in an Astros uniform, and he's talking to his Blue Jays teammates. And, you know, for Varsho, this is just hours later. His whole world's been turned upside down. And I know they're pro athletes making billions of dollars and all, but it's still, whoa. And I mean a Keanu Reeves, not a Tor Bushwell, but a Keanu Reeves, whoa. Unreal. The question is, are the Astros better? They're not worse. They got stronger in X, weaker in Y, and both X and Y needed to get better. They're not worse, but did they really get better? I have seen so many grades for this. And the lowest grade for the Astros side, C+ from ESPN. I saw one athletic expert give the Astros a B grade. He's the same guy that said goodbye to a tantalizing enigma. That's a description of Arrighetti. And that was the whole thing about pitcher of the month, but then that's mine. But then you look at his June, July, and the health issues. If I'm looking to like intentionally downgrade Arrighetti, and I'm not because I'm a big fan of his, health issues, multiple years, now legitimate issues. I saw another athletic baseball expert give the Astros an A grade. So from A to C+ is such a wide range. That should tell you the varying opinions. Because what about Varsho, who the Astros got? A year ago, high power guy. This year, he has sacrificed all the power because now he's one of those high contact guys. But depending on how stat head and geekaholic you want to get, the problem's kind of his defense and contact rate have not compensated for the loss of power, though. His 86 OPS plus is worse than his career mark. It's nice that he's striking out less, but the loss of power has not compensated for the loss of other marks. That's why you see this varying. It depends on the stats you believe in when it comes to Varsho. Now, Arrighetti was under contract control. That's something that a Joe Sheehan talks nonstop about. For like 4 more years, 3 more years, Varsho's out at the end of the year. If you're playing for now, you don't even bring that up. Varsho needs to finish big. His offense this year is down. And he's batting cleanup for the Astros. So Houston made their deal. And here's the weird part. I don't know. In the end, I feel like the Astros did it to justify saying, see, we tried. Because they didn't get better. They just didn't get worse either. One weakness to the other. The starting pitching got weaker, but yet they still needed to add a pitcher. I saw several of the trade commentators go, don't be surprised if the Astros acquire a starting pitcher within the hour. Because they needed one even before giving up one. And they did not acquire one. They just made this one deal. And with the Blue Jays who were in town, and almost felt like they said, at least we could say we did something. We don't have to pay for airfare to send a player across the country. Everybody's in their dugouts in our stadium anyway. The Astros were in on X. The Astros were in white. They never had the players of the minor league system to do any of this. The fact they had to give up Arrighetti. So the Astros made a deal. Didn't get better, didn't get worse, but the Astros made a deal. The Rangers were much more fascinating to me. The Texas Rangers tried to surrender. They tried to sell. They tried to give up. They've now lost 6 straight after they lost last night. The Texas Rangers, I have seen catch nothing but strays after their non-moves yesterday. They tried to trade Jacob deGrom. No trade clause. He said, no thanks. I also heard, I've had trouble finding multiple sources to confirm, Nathan Eovaldi. They're 1-2 on the pitching staff. He has a no trade clause. He said no thanks. And if they were trading those two, it's a complete utter surrender. Nice reload. What they would have got back would have been fascinating. But that's the surrender and a reload. And that's not a bad thing. But I referenced Joe Sheehan again. The danger of trying to make meta moves, of realizing even if we make the playoffs, we're just fodder. We're just participants. And I'm a strong believer of if you can make moves to open a dynasty, if you can make moves that gives you a chance to win the World Series 2 out of 3 years or the next 3 years straight versus participant, or struggle to maybe by half a game win a wild card spot this year to be a participant and then have to struggle again next year. If I can take 1 year off and be a contender for the next 3 or 4, take the year off. Well, the Rangers are only 2.5 back in the West. And in the wild card, I didn't look it up this morning, but you get it. They're within like 3 in the wild card, 2.5 in the West, and they surrendered. Tried to. And they're being blasted. They're catching strays. I think every alphabet soup, let me find this one for you so that I can give you the best example. CBSSports.com did their updated power rankings after the trade deadline. And let's see. The Rangers entered Monday 1.5 games out of the wild card spot, 2.5 out of the AL West. So why were we seeing reports like Jacob deGrom and Nathan Eovaldi having to exercise their no trade clauses? Ridiculous. That's their write-up. So the Rangers realized they're going to have no consistency. They're like the Astros. They didn't have the players to make deals to really get better. / you need so much. You don't have enough players. Because the Astros made a deal. They didn't get better. They didn't get worse. To actually get better, they would have needed to trade for like 2 to 3 players. They don't have enough because they made it clear they were trading no one off the big roster, and they have no minor league system. Rangers have no minor league system too. Okay, I mean, that's the reality. So the Rangers decided We have 2 aging pitchers, contracts X, and we can get a haul for both of them and be a contender for the next 3, maybe longer years. They got to get younger, bad contracts. That's where the Rangers are stuck. Okay, DeGrom said I can win here. He declined. Valdi declined. That's their right. They earned it in their contracts. That's fine. But they're getting blasted now, the Rangers, for wanting to take a tack to being a World Series champ and not a participant. I have no problem with that. It's something the Astros would never do. Did you know that the Rangers have not made the postseason since the 23 World Series win? They missed 24, missed 25. And, well, it's not official they're missing this year. Look, if the AL West is settled, the earliest would be the final Saturday, which Sunday, ending the season. I would be stunned. It's too mediocre. So, yeah, the MLB trade deadline ended yesterday. Astros made a move, but they're not better or worse. Rangers tried to sell and got denied. Those no trade clauses. And now they're getting blasted for wanting to win World Series and not just participate in the playoffs. Fascinating to me anyway. 979-693-1150. DeGrom, no trade clause. Evaldi, no trade clause. I would have loved to have seen what they could have got. At 12 o'clock, which is like 43 minutes from now, Joe Sheehan Newsletter will join me. I'll ask him about the Astros trade. The Rangers looking to sell. Also, the rest of Major League Baseball. Are the Dodgers Thanos? Are they inevitable and more? Oh, I got one quick note for you. Brooks Raley, Aggie baseball player. Former? Is anybody former? Aggie for life? Brooks Raley ended up getting traded during this trade deadline, too. I remember what Brooks Raley when he got drafted by the Cubs. So, yeah, just a little Aggie note for you. When we return, speaking of Aggie notes, heavy Maroon and White Notebook time here on the Louie Bellina Show, presented by CC Electric. The Louie Bellina Show, Tuesday on The Zone.
Listen to The Zone on the Zone app.
Download the app.
Yeah. Thanks to Loyalty Plumbing. The pros at Loyalty Plumbing are ready to serve you, Aggie Land.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Visit them. LoyaltyPlumbingLLC.net.
The Louie Bellina Show. I'm inside the Charles Schwab studio. We're just getting started. 11:35, listen in, SEC by national championship tiers. 12 o'clock, Joe Sheehan, the MLB trade deadline on the D4 Land Services hotline. 1 o'clock, Mike Elko, live, Aggie football fall camp kickoff. And then 1:50, Community Spotlight. Twin City Mission, Ron Crozier, inside the Charles Schwab studio. Great day ahead here on the Louie Bellina Show. And you, always you, text me, 979-693-1150. I'll see what's up inside the inbox, 979-693-1150. Maroon and White Notebook. You probably heard this by now, but just in case you were under a rock or, you had your notifications off, I don't know. Aggie basketball yesterday opened up their 3-game exhibition practice scrimmages in the Bahamas. They beat the University of Victoria. I didn't know they were the Vikes. Yeah, the Victoria Vikes. That's great alliteration. But I didn't know Canada had Vikings. I thought Vikings were an American thing. No, I know it's Norse and Norwegian and all that, but Brian Vikings, right? So I didn't know that I didn't know there were Canadian Vikings. Eh? So, Victoria Vikes, 112-88. Aggies got the dub, 7 players in double figures. You had 11 different Aggies make their debut in the big win over Victoria, 112-88. Mackenzie Mbaku led the way, leading scorer, 17 points. PJ Haggerty had 16 points. Aggie defense forced 42 turnovers. That's a lot. Because I lied. It was 24 turnovers. That's still a lot. And in the end, 112. Aggies with 60 points in the first half, 52 in the second. I mentioned leading scorer Mbaku at 17. You also had Haggerty 16, 13 for Zach Clements, 13 for Jamie Vincent. Aggies dominated the paint in this one. It was 68-36 in the paint points. The only other things because I practice exhibitions, not necessarily my jam, but it is Bucky Ball, and Bucky Ball is my jam. But A&M shot 49% for the game. Outstanding. But help me understand how they shot 56.6 on the Louie Bellina Show, presented by CC Electric. On the Louie Bellina Show, we do believe in the rounding up and down. So 57.6. And believe me, with the free throw shooting, they need all the help they can get. 58%. That's atrocious. So everything was guns and roses. Everything was great, except that free throw shooting was nasty bad. They play again today. It's at 4 o'clock. They play the Colombian school, Toros de Valle. It's a professional team from Colombia. So they play today at 4 o'clock. Toros, is that the Valley of the Bulls? Toros de Valle? Okay, why am I asking you? A, you'd have to text it. I'm going to put it into Google. Toros, what does, I put Wagat dies. I'm typing. What does Toros I got to type it in, Valle mean? I like the name. It sounds like the name of a really good movie. Mean. What does Toros, Bulls of the Valley. So Valley of the Bulls. Look at this. I might not speak English well, but you give me Colombian, I'm all over it. So that's 4 o'clock today. Maroon and White Notebook. Can I throw a hypothetical at you? Because it's one of those things that made my mind go poof. Okay? Poof. What if A&M and Oklahoma are both 10-0? Seriously, what if A&M and Oklahoma are both 10-0 facing each other? I hadn't thought of that. We both had the 11-0. A&M was 11-0 going into Texas. But what if A&M and OU are both 10-0 squaring off against each other in Norman? Nothing is bigger than the Texas game, but for some reason, this OU game has like a red arrow above it. It is the week before Texas, which would make it easy to overlook and Texas is the short week, so it's not like, we got a week. You have a short practice week. It's the Thanksgiving week. Texas is a Friday game. You don't have that big turnaround time. And I'm not going to say you're going to overlook an OU team, which maybe they're going to be 10-0. If John Mateer levels up, and also Arbuckle, their offensive coordinator, why isn't he going to be a year better after he went through his first time through the SEC, who at every step of the way of his career has been hailed as an offensive genius? You've heard me mention this before, but if he levels up, all Mateer has to do is not stink. Could he just be a year better? You follow the pathway on this, right? Their defense is going to be elite again. Their defense is going to be top 5 in the country. We had Pick 6 previews on yesterday. 2 of their 3 units are in the top 3 units in the country. Sure, things change. But barring something meteorite from space, OU's defense is going to be elite again. And I mean good enough to carry them by 9 wins by themselves. So they need their offense to contribute to find 1 or 2 more wins for them to be a CFP team, because their defense is like a 9-win defense by itself. So imagine if A&M and OU are 10-0 each. And then the next week, what if A&M and Texas are 11-0 each? A&M could be facing this kind of historically epic season where A&M and OU are 10-0, and you look at it, and a week later, you could have a battle of 2 11-0s, and that would be the last 2 games of A&M season. A battle of undefeateds followed by a battle. No, that's not possible because OU and Texas play each other. Okay. Whew. I'm happy I stopped myself there. My apologies. Sometimes I get so fired up because if it's A&M and OU are 10-0, that means Texas already has a loss. I'd be okay. How about you? 11-0 A&M against 10-1 Texas after handing OU their first loss. Those last 2 games of the year for A&M have the potential to be something so stupid like that, because that's how tough A&M's schedule is. Something that was fun, ESPN.com. Maroon and White Notebook here on the Louie Bellina Show, Tuesday edition on the Zone. ESPN.com. It was like 40 players to know for the upcoming season, best 40 players. But it wasn't a straight 1 through 40 ranking. They did tiers. I'm a tiers guy. And quarterbacks with a game-changing leap in them. And it was basically quarterbacks. They ranked 5 through 9 in the country. Quarterbacks with a game-changing leap in them. And it's right. Quarterbacks a year ago that didn't necessarily have 12 straight games of epicness, Heisman Trophy-ness, but quarterbacks that, if you take where they left last year, or you take the body of work they did last year, and it says game-changing leap. If they take that leap forward, they could single-handedly win 12 games. They could destroy the universe. I'll give you an example they put on here, Arch Manning. Another one's John Mateer. And if you think carefully about both, you think about the flashes, you think about the highs they had, right? What if their highs becomes their norm? Yeah, they become the best quarterback in college football. You know who else is on the tier? Quarterbacks with game-changing leap in them? Marcel Reed. That's a fact. If Marcel Reed, and here's the thing that I find more interesting. With Marcel, you don't have to take his high and make it norm. That's absurd. His high, if his high was his norm, he might be the greatest quarterback in the history of college football. If Marcel's highs were norm, because his highs were insane. When he's in his zone, he was the best quarterback in college football. If you took his mid and made it norm, he'll finish as the first-team All-American quarterback in college football this year if his mids were norm. The problem, as we know, man, I can't wait for the first game, so we'll quit talking about it, is his lows were catastrophic. His lows weren't low. His lows were catastrophic. When he was off or not in the zone, it was bad. Here was the write-up they put Marcel. Fascinating. Quote, Reed was like a more dangerous Mateer. His mistakes were just as, and there was the word, cataclysmic. He had an even higher interception rate and lower completion rate. They do give him credit. He, quote, but he also made more big-time passes and rushed for more yards and far fewer attempts. He made mistakes in bunches, seemingly struggled to move past one before making another. Yep, chaining mistakes. So that's the tier for Marcel. It's the quarterbacks with a game-changing leap in them. And again, any of these quarterbacks that make it, their team is a favorite to win the national championship, basically. That's how game-changing. That's also how good these quarterbacks actually are. That's how high their high is. With a Marcel, eliminate how low his floor is. And he doesn't need his high to be norm. His mid could be norm, and he's the best quarterback in the country. We need a timeout. Yes, we do. When we return, listen in the SEC by tiers. It's the Louie Bellina Show inside the Charles Schwab studio Tuesday here on the Zone 1150 AM and 93.7 FM.
The Money Machine is open now.
Let's go.
Enter at Zone1150.com, or you can enter through the Zone newsletter to win $5,000.
Come on.
Time now here on the Louie Bellina Show, presented by CC Electric for a listen-in, which a listen-in, I bring in things that I find, things that I listen to that I think enhance the experience, help us get ready, Aggie football, SEC football, things that I just think are cool or rock. And this listen-in is Greg McElroy, his Always College Football podcast, and help us get ready for the college football season. And he does, he talks ball. I've said this so many times. He talks ball. That's why I'm a fan of his. This is the SEC by tiers. What tiers? National championship. Not college football play, but national championship.
Let's get things kicked off with the number one team, according to several, when watching the Southeastern Conference. It's the Texas Longhorns. They walked in last year in 2025 as the preseason number one, first time in school history. They had the Heisman favorite at quarterback. arguably the biggest checkbook in the sport. And then Ohio State knocks them off in week 1, stuffs them a couple times inside the 10-yard line. They lose that game 14-7. And that coronation of being number 1, it had a 1-week shelf life. And then a couple weeks later, Florida destroyed the offensive line, sacked Arch Manning 6 times in the SEC opener. And a season that was supposed to be a parade turned into a little bit of a baptism by fire. It turned into a trial. But here's the part that everybody kind of forgot by the time December rolled around. Manning got better every single week, starting at the midway point of the season. And he got booed there after 10 straight incompletions against UTEP. And then in the finale, he goes out and knocks off a Heisman contender in Marcel Reed and personally ended Texas A&M's perfect season. He finished with over 3,100 passing yards, 26 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. He also added about 400 on the ground and 10 scores as well. They beat Michigan in the bowl. They hit 10 wins for the 3rd straight year. They missed the playoffs. And don't get me wrong, at Texas, that's not a reason to be excited. It's a grievance. But what's going to make them better this year? Well, let's start with the simplest thing in football. A quarterback that is entering into year number 2 of being the starter. And then you add in one of the top transfer portal hauls in the country. You bring in 10 Power 4 starters that are walking into the door. The receiver room went from being a little bit thin at times last year to a nightmare when they went out and signed arguably the number 1 wideout in Cam Coleman. He was at Auburn. He'll line up across from Ryan Wingo. You probably can't double both those guys. You also look at the backfield, a 2-headed monster now with a ton of juice. That was something they lacked last year by adding Hollywood Smothers from NC State, who was a first-team All-ACC back. They also went out and got Rayleigh Brown from Arizona State, who ran for over 1,100 yards. Steve Sarkisian then went and got Will Muschamp to run the defense. Yes, the same Will Muschamp that once built a Texas defense that played for a national championship, and he's got Colin Simmons off the edge to star, and he led the SEC with 12 sacks last year and as a first-team All-American, probably just waiting to happen. The one thing that can sink this whole operation is probably the offensive line. Last year wasn't very consistent. They struggled to move people, and they broke down in the 2 losses that really mattered. The Ohio State game and the Florida game, tough to wrap your head around. They also didn't look good in some of the wins either. So if you can fix the offensive line, then Texas is not just a playoff team. Texas is a legitimate national championship contender. Now, the schedule, very tough, right? Doesn't do them a lot of favors. You get Ohio State and Austin on September 12th. That's a rematch of the exact game that essentially broke the team early in the season last year. And the road is pretty decent-sized gauntlet. You're at Tennessee. You have Oklahoma there in the Red River rivalry. You're at Ole Miss, and you're at LSU. The toss-ups are kind of everywhere, but keep an eye on Florida there on October 17th because the Gators kind of already have the scalp from last year. And someone tells me Texas probably wants some revenge, but Texas firmly in Tier 1 in the SEC. The Georgia Bulldogs, they trailed in 7 of their 8 SEC games last year and went 7-1. That's not a scheduling quirk. That is a personality. 4 of those wins were 4th quarter comebacks. And Kirby Smart just shrugged and said, look, I don't write the scripts, right? Their 1 regular season loss was to Alabama, who walked into Athens and snapped Georgia's 33-game home winning streak, which is the best in college football at the time. So Georgia gets the rematch in the SEC championship, and all of a sudden, 28-7 on the Tide to win the league for the 4th time in the last 5 years. They earned a first-round bye, just like the year before, and they got bounced in the quarterfinals, this time by Trinidad Chambliss, who just went absolutely bananas for Ole Miss. That is now a 3-year playoff win drought in Athens. And at Georgia, that's the whole story. But Gunnar Stockton is why I think the arrow points up. His first full year as a starting quarterback. Feels like he's been around for a while, but first full year as a starting quarterback, the guy threw for nearly 2,900 yards and 24 touchdowns. Had just 5 picks, took care of the football. Also added 10 scores with his legs and over 450 yards. I mean, he managed the game beautifully at times last year. He is a proven championship caliber quarterback. Now he's just got to elevate his play a little bit in creating more explosiveness offensively. But I absolutely believe that he can do it because they returned 14 starters. I mean, and by the way, when Georgia loses a starter, the guy behind him, former 5-star, because the last 4 recruiting classes ranked number 2, number 1, number 2, and number 6. They're probably going to be okay. The receiver room is probably the question right now. And only one of their top 5 pass catchers is back, and that's London Humphreys. But instead of panic buying in the portal, Smart doubled down on his own blue chip stockpile. Guys like 5-star Talon Taylor are kind of ready to pop. And the defense, as always, we know it's a machine. 8 starters are back off a unit that did a great job against the run, held them to just 82 yards a game on the ground. But the pass rush, that's the one thing that needs to pick up. We know that the linebacker room's awesome. We know they're great in the back end. If there was a knock last year, it was the amount of rush created in obvious passing situations. They had just 20 sacks. And they have an offensive line that I think needs to live up to their potential a little bit more. Super talented, but I want to see them get a little more push on a consistent basis. Look, the schedule is manageable, relatively speaking. Georgia faces just 3 of the league's top 8 teams. Of all the contenders, it's probably the most gettable. The games that will define them: Oklahoma at home on September 26th. You get a road trip to Tuscaloosa on October 10th. And then the revenge game. Ole Miss comes to town on November 7th. And I think Georgia probably remembers that Sugar Bowl loss, and it's probably been circled in permanent marker. So the toss-ups, there's a few, but a rivalry is a rivalry. And Georgia Tech in the finale is never as easy as the talent gap says it should be. So Georgia, still the team to beat in this league until somebody actually beats them for it. Let me tell you the most Ole Miss story imaginable. Lane Kiffin spends 6 years turning the Rebels into a playoff team, and then with the program on the doorstep of one of the biggest games in school history, decides to leave for their rival LSU. And everyone assumed that Ole Miss would just fold like a lawn chair, right? Instead, they just promote Pete Golding, defensive coordinator, and he walked them right to the national semifinals. They blew out Tulane. They got Georgia there in the Sugar Bowl, and they held a lead in the final seconds of the semifinal before Miami went and took it. 13 wins, a school record, a number 3 final ranking, the best we've seen in Oxford in over 60 years. And they did it in the middle of a coaching carousel circus. So let me say this as plainly as I can say is pretty much anything on the show. Ole Miss reloads. Ole Miss does not rebuild. The engine is back, and the engine's name is Chambliss. He was a Division II transfer last year, whose only other scholarship offer was Temple. Takes over after week 2 injury to the starter, never gave the job back, then goes on to throw for nearly 4,000 yards passing, adds over 500 on the ground, has 30 total touchdowns, and finishes in the top 8 in the Heisman Trophy ballots. And wins a court case to come back for one more year and enters 2026 as a legitimate Heisman favorite. And he's not alone either. Kewan Lacey is back after tying the school record with 1,500-plus rushing yards and leading all Power 4 running backs with 24 rushing touchdowns. The scheme will change a bit because gone is the old coordinator, Charlie Weiss Jr., in comes new coordinator John David Baker. But he was there in 2023, and he said his offense is about 80% the same as it was when he left in 23. Now, the receivers turned over, and that is a bit of a question mark, but Ole Miss did what Ole Miss does. They restocked the shelves, and I really like the tight end room with Luke Haas and Caleb Odom. Now, here's the part that some people have missed. If you look at the capital that Pete Golding had, well, he poured that capital into his defense. They went out and they signed 8 4-star transfers. Yeah, you lost a couple of big-time players to LSU, but he replaced them and some. He also kept Sunterian Perkins, which is a guy that can absolutely make a ton of plays off the edge. And then you look at the schedule, and it's a bit of a monster compared to what we've seen from Ole Miss the last couple of years. It's a really tough track. September 19th, who doesn't have this one circled? LSU goes to Oxford. And I think that one's probably circled in blood, right? You get Trinidad Chambliss against Sam Levitt. You get Pete Golding against Lane Kiffin, the man who left against the program he left behind. And that does not let up, by the way. They're at Texas on October 24th. You get Georgia on November 7th, and then at Oklahoma on November 14th. Game between 2 of the better teams in the country, in my opinion. Every one of those is a bit of a toss-up. So I would not bet against the guy who already worked his magic last January. I am still very bullish on Ole Miss. Just have to iron out a couple of question marks, the biggest one being the wide receiver spot and all the new faces that will be factoring in there. Here's the last team in Tier 1. Will probably surprise some people. I am higher on Oklahoma than most everybody in college football media. Look, Oklahoma's defense last year, they were not a game plan. They were a demolition derby. Okay. They led the entire country in tackles for loss. They piled up 45 sacks. That was top 3 in college football. They sacked Auburn 9 times. They take fumbles back against Tennessee. They return pick sixes against Alabama. Brent Venables, he was hired to build this exactly. And in 2025, he did, right? A 10-win season, a remarkably difficult schedule in the process, getting Oklahoma's first playoff bid since 2019. So why is a team, the odd makers have 7th, sitting in my tier 1? Because a defense this good does not need a ridiculous amount of help to win a championship. It needs an offense that can just avoid the critical error, avoid the big mistake. And I believe that this offense should be a lot better. I really believe that. It'll start with John Mateer. And if you look at his situation last year, like he's healthy and had to play through a hand injury through half the season. Remember, this is a guy who led all of the FBS with 44 total touchdowns 2 years ago in Ben Arbuckle's air raid. Now he gets a full off season to work on his mechanics, a full off season of adjusting to the speed and the talent that he'll see in the SEC. And if you look last year too, he had to do a lot of it on his own. The run game last year was not what you're looking for. I mean, Venables even described it as not good, right? So they go out and they hire a great running backs coach that helped develop Ashton Genty and Jeremiah Love. So they've done a good job, I think, with their staff additions. They upgraded the receiver room by adding Parker Livingston from Texas and Trell Harris from Virginia. Remember those two names. Those two names, I think, will be really good and taking some of the pressure off Isaiah Satania. And I also look, too, at the tight end room. They had a 3-year SEC starter. And, by the way, your coach, Jason Witten. That's an NFL Hall of Famer. And the defense, the real reason why we're here, they returned 7 starters, including 4 guys that were all SEC selections a year ago, starting with Taylor Wine, who's coming off 7 sacks, 15 tackles for loss. He's got legitimate All-American potential. David Stone is a wrecking ball inside. He could take over the game. You got Eli and Peyton Bowen headlining a secondary that's absolutely loaded. This is a championship caliber defense with a quarterback that I think can scale up compared to what we saw last year. And that, to me, is a tier 1 formula. The schedule, of course, yeah, it's brutal because it's always brutal, right? They open the real slate at Michigan on September 12th. They travel to Georgia on the 26th. They get Texas in the Red River rivalry on October 10th. And the back half brings Ole Miss to Norman, November 14th, and A&M on November 21st. So the toss-ups are stacked, right? But here's my line. If that offense climbs from just enough to really good, then Oklahoma is not just going back to the playoff. Oklahoma has a real chance of competing for a national championship here in 2026.
Yeah, if that Oklahoma offense ends up at a B- grade, B-, that's not special. Oklahoma is a national Final Four type team, but that's a big ask. That was our listen in. Maybe part 1, because there's a tier 2 that's really good. We're not listening to tier 3 and 4 because, well, yeah, I'm not that overly losing sleep over some of the teams like Mississippi State. But that was Greg McElroy's Always College Football podcast, tier 1 of national championship contenders in the SEC. When we return, I got some text messages we need to look at, and that's what's next here on the Louie Bellina Show Tuesday. The Louie Bellina Show presented by CC Electric on the Zone.
Can't reach your radio? Listen to Aggie football online at RadioAggieland.com.